I recently had the opportunity to take a long overdue trip to the great city of Seattle to visit some of the music landmarks that I have seen and read about my entire life. We'll discuss on this episode of Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, a small chain of independent record shops in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're not local but you are in the U.S., you can shop online at ntxvinyl.com, and would love it if you subscribe to our channel here on YouTube and follow us across social media at NTX Vinyl on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Let's talk about my recent trip to Seattle. This is a pretty self-serving video, honestly. I had the opportunity to go finally. It's one of those bucket list trips, if you will. No rhyme or reason why I've never been to Seattle, honestly. It's a long way from Dallas. It's one of those things where I've been saying for years, I gotta get up there, gotta get up there. And one of the reasons why I finally did do it, myself and my wife, is because of the Mopop Museum, or Museum of Pop Culture, which I will get to. The reason why that's so critical is they have some amazing exhibits right now, primarily being a Pearl Jam exhibit, which it's been there a couple of years, and I'm just fearful. I've been fearful that it's going to go away because, exhibits don't last forever in museums. I don't know how permanent it is. But that was the main driver. I was like, I got to get up there and see that exhibit before it's gone. So that was kind of like priority number one, right? From there, there's a laundry list of tons of other things I wanted to see. I did want to go see a show there, which would be fabulous, but there just wasn't anything that lined up on the weekend that we were going to go. But I did get to see a bunch of really cool venues, hit a couple record shops, of course, and then got to see a bunch of landmarks. So I'm just going to kind of go through what I saw. Again, we were there 2.5, 3 days, so pretty quick trip. There's a lot of stuff that we couldn't squeeze in, but these are some of the highlights. First and foremost, the hotel we were staying at, we chose to stay in downtown. There's a lot of different areas of the city, just like any big downtown, big city, but the downtown area is really centralized, right? So we were staying just a couple blocks from the market, which is like the biggest tourist destination, one of the biggest in the world, actually. I didn't realize. But we were staying downtown. Got to where we were walking up to our hotel, and our hotel was literally right across the street from the Moore Theater. And that's when it kind of hit me right off the bat, like, man, I'm going to see a lot of stuff that is going to bring up a lot of memories and thoughts that is a little strange, because you got to keep in mind something like the Moore Theater, just as the first example. Like in 1991, I'm 13 years old. And just like a lot of kids in 1991 who were of a similar age, I was glued to MTV because you had bands like Soundgarden, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Screaming Trees, etc., all breaking onto the national scene right at the same time. And you're seeing these venues that they're playing at in Seattle, all these iconic shows, and you always kind of imagine what they're like, and they're just normal music venues just like anywhere else for the most part, but they have this mystique around them because it's been 30 years. I've been envisioning them for this long, not necessarily like they're some magical place. It's not some magical place, and of course I know it's changed drastically over the years, but as I walked up to the Moore Theater and I saw the marquee, I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like, that's where Alice in Chains played, early shows with Pearl Jam when they weren't even called Pearl Jam. Yeah, they were still called Mookie Blaylock. That's where Pearl Jam played with Neil Young on the Mirrorball tour. Mad Season performed one of their most famous concerts there, one of their few concerts there. And so there was a comedian performing at the theater actually the next night, and we went ahead and just got tickets, even though I'd never heard of the comedian. She ended up being hilarious. I forget her name now. I'll have to put it in the subtitles, but It was great just to go in the venue, just to see the venue, to see, the balcony that Eddie Vedder climbed up on in the Even Flow video and jumped off into the crowd. Like, it's a small place, and so you can envision it a lot more when you see this place in person. But so something like the Moore Theater, that was the first thing that really kind of hit me. Also, we got to walk by Benaroya Hall. We walked by the Showbox. I didn't get to see like the former locations of like Crocodile Cafe and Off Ramp. There's so many iconic venues there where all these bands played for the first times, and of course a lot of them are gone now. They're changed into just different stores and different venues and things like that. So did my best to kind of see some of those. And at least get my bearings as far as where they're at. Like, that's the other thing. It's a big city and there's lots of different neighborhoods. So in just 2.5, 3 days, it's kind of hard to grasp it all and try and soak it in, right? The other thing that I wanted to do for sure, which aside from the Mopop, which I'm going to talk about last, was get to Easy Street Records and some other record stores. Easy Street is actually on the west side of Seattle, outside of downtown, but it's a short, like 10-15 minute bus ride or Uber, if you will, to get over to Easy Street. And Easy Street's been around for a long time and has a lot of history in the area. Amazing in-stores have happened there from bands like Pearl Jam and Brandy Carlisle, and I could go on and on. Tons of artists have played there. And I have been told it's a great record shop. I don't actually go to record shops that much anymore. You imagine, as a record store owner, like, I'm inundated with records 24/7. So going shopping in a record store isn't exactly the same as it used to be when I was just a collector. But I do enjoy going to ones out of town, especially ones that I've always heard about. Easy Street is all it's cracked up to be. It is a really cool shop. Not only is it a great shop with new vinyl and pre-owned vinyl, it's multi-floored. It's got a cafe. It's got kind of two different bars, if you will. It was cold when we went, but they've got like garage doors that open that kind of make it open air when the weather's nice. There's the iconic Mother Love Bone painting on the side of one of the walls, and now the Chris Cornell mural is right next to those. I'll show photos of those for sure. So it was really cool to see those, and it's a really cool shop. It's not a huge shop, which for me is actually a good thing, because I've been into plenty of record stores like Amoeba, which is an amazing store, but it's just overwhelming how big it is. And so it was kind of cool that Easy Street had kind of a small shop feel, but they did have a ton of inventory. The lower floor of it, I believe, was almost all new vinyl for the most part. And they had some more pre-owned upstairs, but it's got a really just indie feel to it. Kind of what I remember record stores being like back in the 90s. Like, that's what it felt like. Tons of memorabilia all around the walls, which is super exciting to see and go in and just kind of like marvel at all the show posters and the signed memorabilia and everything they've got from all the artists who've played there, who've shopped there, those types of things. So that was really cool. I got an Easy Street shirt and a hat and stuff. That's really all I bought. I really did. I looked for some records to buy. I was like, man, if I find something cool, I'll definitely buy it. I just didn't find anything that I necessarily needed, or that I wanted to drop big money on. They did have some collectibles and stuff, but great shop. It was cool. Actually, one of the things that kind of hit me right when he walked in, and this is normal for most record shops, mine included, is there's a local section. Well, it's really crazy to walk into a record shop, go to the local section, and it's Mudhoney, the Melvins, Jimi Hendrix, Nirvana, Alice in Chains. Like, that's really strange to me. Like, and I get it; those are their local artists. Like, that's the scene, right? And there was Modest Mouse, Death Cab for Cutie, Brandy Carlisle. Like, that's just unbelievable to think that is their local scene. It certainly was and still is those types of artists. And so that was really cool to see, like, a local tab, and it's packed with all of those artists that are known worldwide. Like, that's the difference. You come to most cities, myself included, and you look at the local scene, whether it be, around Dallas, Fort Worth, or go to Chicago or go to New York, and like, there's going to be some stuff that bubbles up, because all those cities have artists that have gone on to do big things. But to go through the entire stack of the local artists and know every single one of them, and to realize that they're nationally famous and internationally famous, is just a crazy thing to kind of wrap your head around. So highly recommend Easy Street. fantastic store, super cool vibe. The area around it is all really walkable, cool bars, restaurants, everything. So once you get over there, if you're staying in downtown like I did, getting over to the west side, like I mentioned, it's 10 or 15 minutes, and then you can spend, an afternoon there easily. Highly recommend that. I hit a couple other record stores in the Capitol Hill area, which is back closer to downtown. Zion's Gate, that was a pretty cool shop. Wall of Sound was a really cool um, a really small niche shop that had some interesting stuff. I didn't get to Georgetown Records or Sonic Boom. Those were some of the other ones that I kind of had on my radar, but I just didn't work out. I did get to a really cool bar actually over in the Capitol area. It was called Life on Mars. It was recommended to me by someone. And I believe it's owned by one of the founders of KEXP, if I have that right. I probably have it wrong. KXP, one of those, which is the local, radio station there in Seattle that supports so much of the local scene. And it's a really cool bar because it has a whole wall of records, and you can actually pick a record and hand it to the bartender, and they'll play it. So we landed there just to have a drink, and I was like, oh man, there's a ton of cool records, and it wasn't quite really busy yet. So I actually got to kind of DJ for a couple hours, which was cool. I played some Radiohead, I played a Stooges record, played some Police, and there were other people picking out records too. So you didn't know. They had two turntables going, so as one kind of finished, they would fade it right into the next, and it was all the bartender doing it. So it was a really cool vibe, and it was just it really reminded me after, because this was 2 or 3 days in, reminded me how much more comfortable I am when there's a record spinning, which is a weird thing. Like, and I'll say this, like, we had been there about, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours. We'd had a couple drinks. They were spinning records, and it was getting a little late. It's getting towards dinner time. And I asked the bartender, I said, do you need another record? Because I knew the record that was on was about over. I didn't know if someone else had already handed him something. So I was kind of being polite, but kind of also wanting to pick something out. And he said, oh no, it's getting too busy now. We're just going to go to a playlist. And I was like, oh yeah, I totally get it. Like, they're bartenders. Like, they're very busy. They'll have time to DJ as well. They didn't have anyone there just to spin the records. They should have asked me. But he said, they're just going to put on a playlist. I was like, that's totally fine. I get it. So he put a playlist on, which is, I don't know if it was on satellite or on their Spotify or whatever. And the volume was a little low, but it was getting busy at that time. And it kind of hit me, like, the whole vibe changed, because like no one's paying attention to it anymore. It immediately drifted into being background music, and it wasn't as interesting. And I thought, man, that's really strange. Like, it's probably just me because I'm such a vinyl nerd, where I was like fixated on the fact that other people would hand them records, and I was kind of looking at seeing what they were choosing, and I was kind of seeing where mine was at in the queue. And it was this very interesting thing, no different than when I'm in my own office getting to pick out a record. It was cool being in a setting, and then something would come on. I think like Talking Heads came on or something. I was like, ooh, I wonder who picked that. Like, I'm kind of looking around the bar thinking, that's a really good choice, whoever made that pick. So it's like this really interactive thing, and that whole thing just died as soon as they put on the streaming playlist. But I'm like, I think I'm the only one who feels that, or maybe not. I told my wife, I think I'm crazy, because now I want to leave now that they're not spinning records anymore. But it was an awesome place. They had really good drinks, good beer list, good food. It's a vegan restaurant, so check out Life on Mars. Super cool spot to just grab some drinks. Other big sites, we rented a car for a couple hours, which was essential, because we didn't have one initially. We just used the train and the bus. We walked a lot. We took a couple Ubers. But the last day we were there, I wanted to hit the Jimi Hendrix Memorial, where he is buried and where a lot of his family is buried. That is a must-see. It's not hard to get to, but it's way south of downtown, back near the airport. So we rented the car to be able to get down there, which was really cool. Show you some pictures of that. Then we kind of made a big circle, and we went to see Kurt Cobain's house, where he killed himself. And that was one of those moments where I'm like, do I really want to go see this? Like, it's one thing going to Jimmy's memorial because it's a memorial. It's another thing going to Cobain's house where someone else lives there now, right? And I knew that. And I'm not the first person to make this trip, obviously. But I felt like, you know what? I'm only going to do this kind of sightseeing thing in Seattle one time. And I don't think I'll ever make the effort to do it again. So we had the car, we went by. There's actually it's a beautiful area. beautiful area where he lived of just winding streets, and it's right on the bay. So it's almost overlooking water, which is beautiful. Looking at Bellevue, I think, and there is a place to park that's kind of a public parking area, just I would say maybe a block or two away. So you can park, walk over. You can't really see much of the house. It's a gated house. You know, these are nicer houses. And there is like also, I won't even call it a park. There's just kind of this open area next to that house where there's a couple benches, where a lot of people like me have gone and kind of sat there and looked at the house. And now these benches are all kind of decorated kind of as a makeshift memorial. I mean, there's Nirvana, you know, mentions rest in peace Kurt and things like that on these benches. They're kind of graffitied up. And luckily they've kind of left them there for that purpose, because it's, again, it turned into a makeshift memorial. And but you can see the upper floor of kind of the greenhouse over the garage, I guess, or whatever, where you know, he took his last breaths, and you can kind of see it was very surreal. You know, you're there 5 minutes, you take a couple pictures, it's not a big deal. It was one of those kind of check it off the list things. But I just felt like, again, after hearing of this, seeing of it on the news over and over and over for 30 years, like I at least owe it to myself to just visit these places, just so I can say, yes, I've been there, right? So we checked that off. A little bit of a lull in the mood, obviously, going from Hendrix's grave to Cobain's house. Like I joked with my wife, I'm like, all right, which dead Seattle musician are we going to go visit next? You know, like, it's very sad, honestly. But it is what it is. After that, we continued on our trek, and we went to Discovery Park, which is a beautiful park, sprawling. And the reason why I wanted to go there, besides the fact that it's supposed to be really a really nice walk or hike, and you could spend all day there, but it is the beach where the song Hunger Strike, and the video was filmed for Hunger Strike by Temple of the Dog on this beach. And there's a lighthouse, a small lighthouse at the edge of this beach. And there was plenty of people out there, kind of, it was cold, but there were still people out there picnicking a little bit and just kind of enjoying. It was a nice day, nice sunny day, but it was cool to be there after seeing the Hunger Strike video countless times, to see that lighthouse. And like I said, it was really beautiful. You know, just a beautiful kind of rocky beach in general, overlooking the mountains. So I highly recommend Discovery Park if you've got a car and you can get there. Then we went back down south to our final kind of location, which was the Mopop Museum, or Museum of Pop Culture. They have, I don't know how permanent the exhibits are or not, but I believe the Hendrix exhibit and Nirvana exhibits are kind of permanent, and the Pearl Jam one, which takes up a whole floor, feels permanent, but I have no idea how long it'll be there. But we first went into the Hendrix exhibit, which is really cool. It was kind of a history of his travel, and his touring, which was hectic for the few, you know, because Hendrix wasn't alive that long as a famous musician in regards to his output. You know, a handful of albums, and he just toured his ass off for those years before he passed away. And so it's got a lot of that history of all the different cities he played in and artifacts from those cities. It's got, like, one of the coolest things, it's got one of the chunks of the guitar from the Monterey Pop Festival, the guitar that he lit on fire famously on the stage. Like, there's a piece of that guitar there, which just blows my mind. There's the I think the original mixing console from Electric Ladyland Studios that he built in New York, which is really cool to see. It had some of his original clothing and hats and things like that. So really cool to see some of those Hendrix artifacts and read some of the stories. It had handwritten lyrics and all kinds of stuff. So that was really cool. The Nirvana exhibit, which is even a little bigger than the Hendrix one, also very cool. Tons of artifacts. I'm talking about, like, the instruments played on stage at Unplugged and played on stage at famous concerts that, you know, iconic concert. Tons of set lists, backstage passes, you know, personal photos, everything you can imagine. All the handwritten lyrics and set lists, and you know, poster art, original shirts that they wore, wardrobe, all kinds of stuff. Just all kind of memorialized in one exhibit, which is really cool. And a lot of Sub Pop, obviously, artifacts as well, going back to the early days. And it wasn't just Nirvana, it was kind of the whole scene that created around them with the Melvins and Mudhoney and everything, Green River, everything Sub Pop related, right? So very, very cool. And then there's the Pearl Jam exhibit. So this is the Pearl Jam exhibit that originally, I think, that they made available when they did their PJ20 shows, which they did a whole weekend of shows. I think it was in Alpine Valley. I was an idiot. I didn't go. But they initially had this exhibit there, and then I assume they had planned on transferring it to Mopop. So now it takes up the whole top floor of Mopop, and it is similar to what I just said about Nirvana. Like, man, it is the mecca of everything Pearl Jam related. You're talking about like hundreds of lyric books, the original lyric books of Eddie's, all in a case. You can see them all by date, dating back to the early 90s. All of the artifacts that were used to create their album artwork. So you've got like the Lost Dogs, the cover of Lost Dogs, with it's got the like barrel with the tape coming out of it. They had that actually there. They've got the signs from the original venues of like the Off Ramp and a couple other venues that they played in the early days. You've got, again, tons of set lists, tons of posters, tons of VIP passes and laminates from their photographers over the years and tour books. You've got a couple different spots in the museum where they're playing, obviously, Pearl Jam montages of photography from Lance Mercer and Charles Peterson and Danny Clinch, all the famous photographers who shot them over the years. It's just overwhelming. You've got the original signage from the Pearl Jam 10 cover of the words Pearl Jam that they made and stood in front of. I'm just so glad I did it. So glad I did it. So glad I got to see it. Like, it's all very, you walk through. We were there we were at Mopop maybe, I don't know, 2.5, 3 hours, because you can go in and really read a lot and soak it all in. And we did as much as we could. We had plenty of time. So highly recommend it if you're a Pearl Jam fan. They had, there's a huge bronze statue of Andrew Wood that Jeff Ament commissioned. There's lots of Mother Love Bone and Green River stuff in there. There's a ton of stuff from their manager, Kelly Curtis, who I don't want to say donated, but he let them display all of his gold records and platinum records and everything from all the different releases, not only the albums, but the DVDs and just everything that he's accumulated over the years. I'm trying to think of other big high points. There's just so much. It was completely overwhelming seeing like, Eddie's corduroy jacket or a specific guitar or bass that was really iconic to the time period. Like, it's got it all. Thank God Jeff Ament is around, because if you've seen the PJ20 film, like, he's within the band, like, he's the archivist. He's the one who keeps everything. Like, there's this famous quote from Stone where Stone has like nothing. And he basically says, as long as I maintain my relationship with Jeff Ament, I know I can always access it, because Jeff apparently keeps everything. And it makes sense, because Jeff's one of the ones, along with Eddie, who did so much of all of their artwork and still does, I think, not only for the albums, but all of their, merch and posters and just everything that they're involved with from a creative standpoint. There's lots of that stuff. So Mopop was incredible. Outside of Mopop, there's the Chris Cornell statue that was commissioned and presented just a couple years ago. So that was really kind of cool to see that. And then last but not least, we're on our way out of town and we're flying out of Seattle, and there's the Sub Pop store in the Seattle airport, which is really, really cool. Tons of records, obviously all Sub Pop Seattle related, but there's also tons of memorabilia there, lots of books, and really cool Sub Pop merch. So I definitely checked that out. It's in Terminal C, I think. As we were headed out of town, we just happened to be flying out of that terminal, which was really cool. So awesome trip. So glad I did it. The last thing I'll say is I did have a very melancholy feeling the entire time I was there. It was hard to put into words, the feeling that I had being there. I didn't have like some big expectations, like it was going to be this amazing thing, like seeing Seattle in 2023. Like, I'm talking about all this stuff that happened mostly in the early to mid 90s. So I know everything's changed. I completely realize that I don't have the expectations that I'm going to go and be able to see things like they were. But just being in the city, and for the first time in my life after 30 years, visualizing all these things in the flesh, it wasn't that I was disappointed that they weren't as cool or weren't as interesting. it was just like kind of a full circle moment where I'm like, man, I've been hearing about these, reading about these, watching about all these places on TV for many, many, many years. And to kind of bookend it with like, okay, they're really here. I've seen them all. And I think I really walked away with the feeling of like, I want to do this a lot more. I want to like become a little more familiar with the area, and just I want to go see some more. I want to see some actual shows in these venues for sure, like the Showbox and Benaroyal and things like that, um, because I think that'll crystallize it even more and bring it more into reality. Because it is just like this kind of fiction. It's been this fictional place for me for so long. To finally be able to see it in the flesh, it was incredible. It was a little odd, but I'm glad we did it, and I'm definitely planning on going back and spending more time there. It's a really cool city. It reminded me a lot of San Francisco in regards to the vibe, because it sits right on the water, and the market, and like there's uh, a lot of vibe in that area that's very touristy, which is similar to San Francisco if you go down like Fisherman's Wharf or something. So, but the food scene is fantastic. The bar scene is fantastic. Lots of record stores, lots of music history. I can't recommend it enough to anyone who's thinking about making the trip. So there's my trip to Seattle. I appreciate you letting me reminisce about it. I definitely plan on getting back there again soon. So hope you enjoyed it. If you're planning on going yourself, you've never been, hopefully some of this was helpful. I'd love further recommendations. I know I missed a ton of stuff. We didn't go by the Singles House. There was a bar where Kurt Cobain was last seen alive. I think it was called Linda's. We almost went by there, didn't go there. And I mean, there's just so many. There's so many places you could visit that, and a lot of them are just like quick photo ops. But others are a little more. There's a little more meat to them in regards to what you can experience. So I thought we got a good cross section again, being in there just a couple days. So there you go. Appreciate you listening. This has been my travel journal episode of talking about records here from our visit to Seattle. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again next time.